Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook, and welcome to this first installment of Reference Point for 2019. Happy to have you with us tonight. Tonight, I've got two wonderful folks here as my guests, Beth and Peter Bostwick, who have written a book, but also have an organization called You Can Choose. You Can Choose. And we're going to talk to them about what that means, why this book is in print, and how they came about to be doing the things that they're doing, which is really looking to help people improve their situation in personal, business, interpersonal relationships, whatever it has to be. So, Beth, Peter, welcome to Reference Point. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
So tell us, you have an organization named You Can Choose. How did that, it's an interesting name, and so how did you come up with that one?
Well, it came out actually of a pretty rough experience we had with the company we started. And it was really when we started to recognize how powerful our thinking really is that we decided, okay, so this is something that everybody else needs to know about. Because this is something that I never knew about, never had been exposed to growing up. And it's so basic, we all think, right? But the fact that you can choose what you think about was not something that was part of my lexicon, if you will, growing up.
Not anything that you were, there was not an orientation that was provided to you through your schooling.
No, definitely not. And the whole idea of You Can Choose is really empowering, right? It puts the joy of the experience on you because you get to do the choosing.
You get to do the choosing.
Yeah, okay. And that's really the core message that we have to say here is about personal empowerment.
And I think that's really critical, especially in today's environment. The technological world we live in is it's a me based kind of a world, but from a non-empowering perspective, okay? And the three of us had a chance to have coffee 3 weeks back, and we were talking about some of the things that you're doing. And one of the things that I commented on is that the message that is part of what you're doing with You Can Choose is not a brand new message.
No.
It's not like it's never been heard before.
Right.
I've got my copy of As a Man Thinketh from James Allen, which was written God knows when, And here this is from Sanskrit, from like the Bhagavad Gita has a lot of similar stuff, and this was like thousands of years old. So it's not like this idea of personal empowerment is brand new.
Nope.
So why do it?
Because nobody's talking about it in today's terms. One of the things that was particularly frustrating for me was we're going through this particularly challenging time. I had no sense that there was anything out there that could help me or that I could help myself. And when we really started to understand more about the power your thinking offers, not only to you, but to the experience you have in the world, it creates this amazing world that you live in. It's all within your control. It's not like anybody needs to teach you how to do it, because we all think, right? We grow
usually
from the very beginning, right? But the idea that you can think intentionally about what you want and take yourself out of a victim mode, or things feel like they're happening to me, and shift it to one of I can take charge of my life and I can move forward. That's a big, big difference for people.
True. Yeah. So would you be willing to put some context into this for our audience? Because you talked about a situation or whatever. Would it be okay, or would you be willing to?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So give us some context.
Sure. So about 15 years ago, Beth and I started a software company in our backyard, just like so many other software companies around here. We're following along with how it should work. We had fits and starts trying to make it work. And then one day someone called us up and said, hey, we want to use your technology to make a big difference in the vending industry. We didn't know anything about the vending industry, but we said, sure, let's give it a shot. So we created software that helped people replace vending machines in break rooms.
Oh,
So
office break rooms.
exactly.
Right
So
there,
lots of millions of vending machines are in break rooms where people go down and grab the lunch.
Yeah.
Our idea was to take out the vending machines and put in a little micro market or a little store. So you rip out the vending machines, you put in shelves and a cooler, and you put our little self-checkout machines in there, little kiosks that we developed. And it was great, fantastically successful. So we sold thousands of these things in the United States and Canada. And we're cruising along, living the Silicon Valley dream, dozens of employees. But it was tough work at the same time, as all software and companies should be.
Not should be, I'm sorry.
And then, well, at least that's how we
Seemed to
thought.
be,
There
yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
But that's what
We believe that
But that's what our thinking was,
Yeah.
right? And then we got sued by our biggest customer.
Ooh.
Yeah, so all of a sudden everything was going great, or not so great, but then it was going really, really, really bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
So we got sued by our customer, and I was struggling with depression at that time. So this was like a double whammy. It's like, oh my gosh, all these bad things that are going on with us. And as we were going through that, we got sued, and then we actually lost the lawsuit. And we found out we had about 4 months to go until we were going to go back.
I'll stretch it to 6.
Okay.
4 to 6 months.
4 to 6 months.
Yeah,
Until-
not much,
Then
yeah.
it was like close the
Pretty much
doors,
gone, yeah. Close
the
everything
door.
done, all
Yep.
gone.
Exactly. And at that time,
Which in and of itself is also not an unusual situation
No.
for people in entrepreneurs.
Nope, exactly.
it isn't. It isn't. We thought things happened to us, and
Right.
this is what the repercussions were. We were getting taken down, and all kinds of bad stuff was happening.
Right.
And then I started reading, these books similar to what you're pulling up there in terms of how
These ones,
your
right.
Yeah.
Not the
thinking
one we read.
works, right?
Right.
And it's amazing how much information is out there, but how difficult it is to access in terms of to understand and to use it. Because
Right.
I remember very specifically going to Beth and saying, wow, this is great. I finally found something that I can't find fault with.
Right.
And I showed it to her.
And I looked at him and it's like, come back to me with the Cliff Notes version.
Because it's so deep and
Right.
esoteric.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, how do I apply this?
Right.
Right.
So, but I muscled through it and figured it out. I was like, wow, the biggest thing I came up with is your thoughts matter, and you can choose your thoughts.
Exactly.
Right.
So with those two things, thinking about what I thought, thinking about what you think about, all of a sudden I was able to go from being in a position of being a victim to feeling empowered.
Right.
And it was really that, it wasn't like an instant, but it was a transition that took place.
Right.
So I went from, oh my gosh, everything is going wrong with me, to a position where I was like, oh wow, if what I think about matters and I can choose what I think about, I can get out of the situation that
Right.
I'm in. And actually, what I find out later on is, well, the situation I'm in is because of the way I was
Because
thinking.
you were thinking, the way you
Exactly.
were thinking.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So that was it. So that was kind of the beginning, but that was what, in 2000?
Early 2016.
Yeah, I started making that transition.
Right.
And then where it really came through to me is well, the company was, like Beth said, we're 6 months away from going under.
Right.
I hired an investment banker to go out there and try to sell it. And of course, I was broadcasting, subconsciously,
We're going bankrupt.
We're going bankrupt.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I'm no good. I'm no good. I feel really
Yep.
crappy about myself. And we're going out there trying to sell the company, and everyone looks at me and goes, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
Why would I buy you? Because
Right.
you feel so bad
Right.
about yourself. They weren't saying that,
Right. But yeah, I get
but
it.
it was there.
Yeah.
And so then after reading the book, or reading these books and starting to change my thinking, then I changed the way I felt about myself and where I viewed myself in the world.
Right.
Right. And then in doing that, all of a sudden, opportunities came my way.
Very cool.
Yeah. And so what I did is one of these days, one day I remember very specifically walking the dog at 7 o'clock in the morning, and an idea popped into my head. I should call one of those companies that said no just a couple months ago and see what happens. So very different from anything I've ever done before. I just pulled my cell phone out, called the CEO and said, hey, this is Peter. Would you be interested in getting back together and seeing if we can make something happen?
And
he says, yes.
Well, there you go.
Yes, very much so.
And you went back and told Beth, and she said, no, this couldn't have happened, right?
No, I said, I'm one of these people that I have to see it work. And when he first came to me and said, I think I found something I can't find fault with, I thought, okay, now I need to start paying attention, because Peter could find the hole in anything. He never wanted to go see a movie with him because he'd explain all the reasons why it could never happen. So it was like, kind of lost the entertainment value. But when he asked me or told me that, I thought, okay, now I need to start paying attention to what he's talking about here, because I knew that there was something that was pretty significant for him.
Right.
And then when this whole thing happened with the dog, I was out walking, and made this phone call, and he came back and he's like, you'll never guess what happened. And I said, you're right, I would never guess that would happen. And it's like, well, let's just go with it. And so that was, to me, the moment that it proved itself, if you will.
Okay.
And so then it's like, okay, so now I need to figure out for myself how this actually works. And so in the morning I go out walking with the dog, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna start thinking about the lights are gonna be green when I come up to them. It's at 6 in the morning, so it's not like it's that big a deal, but it was just starting with something like that I started to intentionally think about, okay, so I'm going to come up to the intersection and the light's going to, if not be green, it'll be green very shortly. Same thing with parking lots. There's nothing worse than going to the shopping center and there's like no parking.
Right.
And it's like, I'm just going to assume that there's going to be a place there for me and just let it happen, and just not get uptight about it and say it's got to be there, which is what I've always done in the past, but just to shift my thinking from it has to happen my way to it'll just happen and it'll work out. And
so how easy or hard was it to make that shift?
For me, it was a challenge. I think Peter he'd spent a lot of time reading about it, really trying to figure out, there's got to be something better to life than, where we are at this moment. And I am not a person who has ever had an experience or even known somebody who suffered from depression. So that was a whole new experience for me. And so I had to really dial back my go out and exercise and, walk it off kind of thing.
Right.
Just didn't quite work. And so I had to retune my sensors, if you will, to what worked for him and what didn't work. And so when he, as part of this, I think I found something, then I thought, okay, so I need to start really listening and learning. And so I can go out and ride a bicycle and, 2 hours later, all those cobwebs are gone and things are great, but he couldn't do it. But this was something that he found that really seemed to work for him. So it's like, wow, we need to probably start talking to people about this, because ultimately we were able to sell the company.
Right.
All the employees kept their jobs. We made money. We didn't make billions, but we made money. We weren't living under the bridge, which was kind of always my bad part. Exactly. That's right.
That's where we were at sometimes. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but it's been a couple years that we've really been paying attention to the way we think, but now we are very intentional in the way we approach the world, and we see the world as limitless, not limited.
Right.
And that's a big shift.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. So you asked the question, what was it hard to get there, make that shift? And there's really two parts to it. One is realizing that you can do this. You can think differently. And then the next one is actually intentionally thinking differently.
Right.
So it's really, and that's one of the things that we were uncovering. It's like, okay, great, this, and you can read that it's possible in all these other books.
Right.
But how do you do it?
Right.
That's the challenge. How do you do it? And
I think you've touched on a really interesting point, because a lot of material that you can read, even something like As a Man Thinketh, which is a really eye-opening kind of a book. It's like, how do you do this?
Right.
How do you make this change? How do you recognize what you're thinking? How do I control? And I've got some friends that do, Zen Buddhism, and they talk about the monkey mind and this, that, and the other thing, and don't let you have to control thoughts and or don't think or do think. And depending on who you're talking to,
Right.
it's like different things. But the bottom line really is that there is an activity. Okay, that activity is under control of whatever force it is that empowers that activity. And so you talk about it in your book. You used, I'm trying to remember the term that you use, and it's something that comes pretty early in.
I'm impressed. He's got all the pages.
Our greater self. His greater self is that term. Okay,
Yeah.
Which I don't. Was one that I was unfamiliar with, but I concluded from that it's the idea of the difference between if you close your eyes and you think of an elephant, who's looking at the elephant? Okay, that's the greater self. I'm kind of guessing is what you're talking about there. That's the who that's doing the looking is also the one that is controlling the thinking.
Well,
I don't know if I'm interpreting that correctly or not.
Yeah, not quite. So, because I think there's three levels. I like to think of there's three levels of the self, right? There's the greater self, there's the believing self, and there's the active self.
Right.
So the people that are sitting here talking right now are our active selves, right? We're involved in it.
Manifestation.
Right. We're involved in it. We're thinking, we're reacting, we're doing all that stuff. And then behind that is our believing self, which has got all of our memories of what's going on and a lot of the ingrained automatic processes that we already have is there as well. They're a little harder to get to, but they're just as accessible if we know how to get to them. And then our greater self is just that. It's our greater self. It
all
looks
knowing,
all knowing and
seeing.
looking at things a little from a very bigger perspective. Like you said, as if you're coming at it from when your eyes are closed perspective. But it's not taking control of us. We're still completely in control of our active selves that are here.
It's the real you.
Right. We're all the real you.
Well, yes, I get it.
We're all the real
right.
you.
Yeah.
Yes.
A different. What's the word I'm looking for? It's a different persona of you. It's like I'm in the sales business. Okay. And I know when I go into a meeting with a prospective client that depending upon how that, what that client's background is or what role they play in the company, I have to approach that situation from a different perspective.
Right.
And so these three layers are sort of like approaching life and the universe from a different perspective.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's the same approach E.
Exactly.
Approach her.
Right.
And I use three just as for simplicity, right? It's not, we're all the same and it's
I get it.
Everyone's got different levels.
Okay.
Right.
So let's talk about belief is something, the term you use, and in your, I like this one too. I mean, this was like one of the things when I was reading your book, you were talking about beliefs and how beliefs have a massive impact on the way that you think.
Absolutely.
Right. And I want to I'll talk about that in a minute, but before you do, I want to remind our viewing audience that if they have any questions about what it is that we're talking about here today, to send in inquiries. You've got my email address, info@referencepointtv.com. We'll get the questions to Peter and Beth, and then we can answer those questions and learn about them, the book, whatever. All right, let's talk about beliefs.
Yeah.
Because beliefs come to us how?
They come to us from the very beginning when we were youngsters. They come to us from things we've observed on the street, from family, from things we've read. They come from our experiences.
Okay.
And all those experiences build on each other. And there may be something that you have, early in your childhood that, taught you that, a stove is hot. Maybe you put your hand on it, and so there's a belief you have that if you get too close to a stove, you'll burn yourself. Now, that might change as you grow older and you decide that you want to cook and so forth. So you've learned that, okay, so maybe it's not, I just need to be careful about a hot stove and make sure it's not on when I touch it or something. But at a more basic level, that's where it starts. But as we get older, we'll attach different things to those beliefs. So as you're cooking, maybe you find that, you know, you don't want to use a gas stove because the flame is something that you just really, you know, you have a fear based on, you know, that touching that stove, that, you know, flame or fires when you're a kid at a campfire. Just, you know, and then there might be other things that as you get older that you just avoid because they have to do with fire. And so the thing that gets to be a challenge for folks is when you have these beliefs, you don't always know where they came from. And you just, they're operating kind of in the background like white noise.
Like an automatic.
Exactly.
Do you know that they're there?
You can if you learn to pay attention to them.
Pay attention, right.
And that's one of the things that we do in our workshops, and some of the tools that we have is get you to start paying attention to some of those limiting or hidden beliefs that you have. And I'm hesitant to use hidden because they're not, you just don't see them.
You're just not observing them.
Right.
That's right.
Right. I mean, I know that you can, I drive down the freeway, you know, in the road, and there's stuff that's there that you don't see necessarily.
Exactly.
Especially when you're driving. If you're a passenger, you see things that you don't see when you're driving.
And the first time you went down that road, you saw things completely different,
Exactly.
right? And after going through it 10 or 15 times, you go down the same road and it's automatic.
Right.
You don't even bother getting into it. But there's things along that road that might be interesting and exciting to you, or maybe that you're automatically reacting to.
One of the ones that comes to mind to me regularly, every time I get a new car, I see that car all over the place.
Yes,
in
exactly.
that color. They were never there before.
Right.
No one ever had that car until I bought mine.
Perfect example. That's a perfect thing. Yeah.
It's like, woo. So those beliefs then are there. You build a kind of an infrastructure for your life around these beliefs, but you may not necessarily know that that's what you're doing. Is that
a lot
what
of
you're
people,
saying?
yes. A lot of people don't. And I think one of the things that we found particularly powerful as we started to really pay attention to the way we were thinking about things is those thoughts that we would observe. It's kind of like, you know, I'd pretend I was like a fly in the wall and I'd watch myself interact, even though waiting in the grocery store line. So did I find myself getting agitated, or was I really frustrated because, you know, it was taking too long or something? And I'd start to watch my thinking around that and pay attention to, okay, so I'm now frustrated. Why am I frustrated? And I'd start to think through, and so there's different layers that you go through, and so you may not always uncover a belief, but there may be a particular experience that you had that's informing that behavior or those feelings. And so paying attention to the way you think, or even what you're thinking about, will give you sometimes clues into what's maybe behind it. And there may be a belief, or it may be just experience that you've never really moved beyond.
Sure, and yeah, either one will have can be a root cause for the result.
But the important thing is you can change all that.
Yes,
That's
And that's the whole thing.
We're gonna. I'm gonna ask you guys if you'll stick around. We've got about 5 minutes left in the show, if you believe it or not.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun, right? But we're just at the point where we're starting to dig into the most significant things. So if you don't mind sticking around, we'll end up and we'll have another show in about 5 minutes.
Sure.
But I want to. The thing about beliefs that for myself that I've observed with me and with other people, they become a safe haven. Okay, and so anything that, even if your situation in life is not the greatest, you have this safe haven because you have this belief system that informs and infuses everything that's going on where you are and what you're doing in your life. And it can be very threatening for someone to look to change those things. Yeah. So how do you help someone get past that?
Well, so I used to believe that I was a victim. Okay, which you think, well, that's not a good thing, but it actually is a good thing, because when you're a victim, you can play that role, right? You can say, oh, no, not me, and you can play that role, and I did that very, very well. But it has negative repercussions.
Right.
But as we were going through and learning about the concept of you can choose, it's like, I don't want to be a victim anymore. And that was a change of mindset, because it wasn't like, oh, I have this one-liner, I'm a victim. There's a lot behind that. There's a lot behind that. So it's like, okay, how do you get behind that to understand who am I now? Who do I want to be?
Who do I want to be?
Who do I want to be? Exactly, which is every time you come to one of our workshops, the first thing we talk about is, what do you want?
Yeah.
And it's nice to know what you don't want, but it's more impactful and more empowering to know what it is that you do want.
Right.
So it's like, how do I go from being a victim to being the person that I am today, which isn't a victim, right? So that was the steps to do that, as maybe we'll get into in the next next
I think we should, because this concept of what do I want, there's different layers of that too, and or what is really something that has what is it really what you want, or are you saying I want the $1 million? You know, is that what you really want?
Because everybody
you know?
else thinks I should. Want
because
that.
everybody thinks you should. Okay. So we'll dig into that when we get back. But just as our quick, because we've got about a minute and 15 seconds left in this segment. But what I'm taking away from this thing about what you just said about that, if you recognize that there is something behind this view that you have of yourself or the world, then you have the opportunity to dig deeper and identify an experience or a belief that is a trigger point for that or is a root cause. But if you don't do that, if you're not willing to do that, then you're just going to keep on going.
Right.
That's right.
But the thing that's so powerful is you can choose to change that. Everybody has that ability.
I like that. And you can choose to change that, which is exactly the key point. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back with another episode of Reference Point. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.